This is the 7th day of the April 88 7-day retreat. Today we will read from Wong Po and Krishnamurti. Some of you may have heard some of the selections, maybe all of the Wong Po many times, maybe some of the Krishnamurti. There are others who may not have heard it before. The books, readings are not brought in to bring in authority or final authority, but to listen with open eyes and ears, openness. Not to take the words for the truth, believe in them, or whatever the brain is accustomed to do. But to wonder, to open up in wonderment and find out for oneself. The Wong Po book is called Zen Teaching of Wong Po, translated by John Blofeld. The dialogue that will be read and what is called in here sermons by Wong Po were written down by his disciple, Pe Su, who was a scholar, a Buddhist scholar, and also the governor of the province in which Wong Po taught. He is the questioner, Pe Su. There's a question that came up in the year, we don't know the exact year, 8th century or 9th century, and it's coming up today. What is the way and how must it be followed? Wong Po, what sort of thing do you suppose the way to be, that you should wish to follow it? Questioner. What instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the truth? I must interrupt here and say that words dharma has been translated to truth, dhyana into meditation, and this will happen. We're not using the Buddhist terms to make it more generally comprehensive. Also, is not a complete rendition of Wong Po's teaching because words, sentences, and paragraphs have been omitted, edited by myself. Not rewritten, but omitted for what appears to me to be clearer understanding. What instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation, practice, and the study of the truth? Wong Po. Words used to attract the dull of wit are not to be relied on. Questioner. If those teachings were meant for the dull-witted, I have yet to hear what truth has been taught to those of really high capacity. Wong Po. If they are really people of high capacity, where could they find people to follow? If they seek from within themselves, they will find nothing tangible. How much less can they find a teaching worthy of their attention elsewhere? Do not look to what is called the teaching by preachers, for what sort of true teaching could that be? The question says, if that is so, should we not seek for anything at all? Wong Po, by conceding this, you would save yourself a lot of mental effort. Questioner. But in this way, everything would be eliminated. There cannot just be nothing. Wong Po, who called it nothing? Who was this fellow? But you wanted to seek for something. Questioner. Since there is no need to seek, why do you also say that not everything is eliminated? Wong Po. Not to seek is to rest tranquil. Who told you to eliminate anything? Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? Questioner, do you mean that we should not form concepts as human beings normally do? Wong Po, I have not prevented you. But concepts are related to the senses, and when feeling takes place and concepts are formed, wisdom is shut out. Questioner. Then should we avoid any feeling in relation to the truth? Wong Po, where no feeling arises, who can say that you're right? Questioner, why do you speak as though I was mistaken in all the questions I have asked your reverence? Wong Po, you are a man who doesn't understand what is said to him. What is all this about being mistaken? Questioner. Up to now you have refuted everything which has been said. You have done nothing to point out the truth to us, or the true teaching. Wong Po. In the truth there is no confusion. But you produce confusion by such questions. What sort of truth or true teaching can you go seeking for? Questioner. Since the confusion arises from my questions, what will your reverence's answer be? Wong Po. Observe things as they are, and don't pay attention to other people. There are some people just like mad dogs barking at everything that moves, even barking when the wind stirs among the grass and the leaves. And he goes on. Regarding this Zen doctrine of ours, since it was first transmitted, it has never taught that men should seek for learning from concepts, or form concepts. In quote, studying the way, unquote, is just a figure of speech. It is a method of arousing people's interest. In fact, the way is not something which can be studied. Study leads to the retention of concepts, and so the way is entirely misunderstood. Moreover, the way is not something specially existing. Truly, it is located nowhere. The first step is to refrain from knowledge-based concepts. This implies that if you were to follow any empirical method to the utmost limit, on reaching that limit you would still be unable to locate mind. Here with a capital M. The way is spiritual truth. It was originally without name or title. It was only because people ignorantly sought for it, empirically, that the Buddha appeared and taught them to eradicate this method of approach. The Buddhas, it says. Fearing that nobody would understand, they selected the name Way. You must not allow this name to lead you into forming a mental concept of a road. Later on, Pesu says, from all you have said, mind is the truth, or the Buddha. But it is not clear as to what sort of mind is meant by this mind, which is the Buddha. And Wong Po asks, how many minds have you got? Questioner says, but is the Buddha the ordinary mind or the enlightened mind? Wong Po, where on earth do you keep your ordinary mind and your enlightened mind? Questioner, in the teachings of the three vehicles it is stated that they are both. Why does your reverence deny it? Wong Po says, in the teaching of the three vehicles it is clearly explained that the ordinary enlightened mind are illusions. You don't understand. All this clinging to the idea of things existing is to mistake vacuity for the truth. How can such conceptions not be illusory? Being illusory, they hide mind from you. If you'd only rid yourselves of the concepts of ordinary and enlightened, you would find that there is no other Buddha than the Buddha in your own mind. Your own mind. There's no Buddha in it. It's a way of speaking. You people go on misunderstanding. You hold to concepts such as ordinary and enlightened, directing your thoughts outwards where they gallop about like horses. All this amounts to beclouding your own minds. As soon as thought or sensation arises, you fall into dualism. Beginningless time and the present moment are the same. There is no this and no that. To understand this truth is called complete and unexcelled enlightenment. And the questioner says, upon what doctrine does your reverence base these words? Wong Po, why seek a doctrine? As soon as you have a doctrine, you fall into dualistic thought. Questioner, just now you said that the beginningless past and the present are the same. What do you mean by that? Wong Po, it is just because of your seeking that you make a difference between them. That's right, isn't it? I'm this now, but I will become that in the future. 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, another lifetime, or in many lifetimes. That's how we create time. If you were to stop seeking, how could there be any difference between them? Between, how did he put it, beginningless past and the present moment. It's one moment. question, if they are not different, why did you employ separate terms for them? Wong Po, if you hadn't mentioned ordinary and enlightened, who would have bothered to say such thing? Just as those categories have no real existence, so mind is not really mind. And as both mind and those categories are really illusions, wherever can you hope to find anything? Later on, at some point, Wong Po says, so full understanding can come to you only through an inexpressible mystery. The approach to it is called the gateway of the stillness beyond all activity. If you wish to understand, know that a sudden comprehension comes when the mind is purged of all the clutter of conceptual and discriminatory thought activity. Those who seek the truth by means of intellect and learning only get further and further away from it. Not till your thoughts cease all their branching here and there, not till you abandon all thoughts of seeking for something, will you be on the right road. Later, Wong Po says, were you now to keep your minds motionless, whether walking, standing, sitting, or lying, no reliance on others, no attachments, just allowing all things to take their course the whole day long, as though you were too ill to bother, unknown to the world, innocent of any urge to be known, or unknown to others. Truth would penetrate your understanding through and through. In a little while, you would find yourselves unattached. Thus, for the first time in your lives, you would discover your reactions to phenomena decreasing. Later on he says, hence all teachings as those purported to lead to the attainment of enlightenment possess no reality. The words of Gautama Buddha were intended merely as efficacious expedients for leading men out of the darkness of worse ignorance. It was as though one pretended yellow leaves were gold to stop the flow of a child's tears. Samyak Sambodhi, that's a Sanskrit term meaning supreme knowledge, is another name for the realization that there are no valid teachings. Once you understand this, of what use are such trifles to you? According harmoniously with the conditions of your present lives, you should go on as opportunities arise, and above all, you must avoid building up a fresh store of retribution for yourselves. Though others may talk of the way as something to be reached by various pious practices and scripture study, you must have nothing to do with such ideas. A perception, sudden as blinking, that subject and object are one, will lead to a deeply mysterious, wordless understanding. And by this understanding, you will awake to the truth. When you happen upon someone who has no understanding, you must claim to know nothing. He may be delighted by his discovery of some way to enlightenment. Yet if you allow yourselves to be persuaded by him, you will experience no delight at all, but suffer both sorrow and disappointment. Even if you obtain if you do obtain from him some trifling method, it will only be a thought-constructed thing, having nothing to do with truth. Truth is something never lost to you even in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. It depends on nothing and is attached to nothing. It is all-pervading, spotless beauty. It is the self-existent and uncreated absolute. It is a jewel beyond all price. This book is called Krishnamurti to Himself. His last journal was spoken into a tape recorder by Krishnamurti and slightly edited by Mary Lutyens, spoken about 2 years before he died. All of this written in Ojai, California, 1983. There is a tree by the river, and we have been watching it day after day for several weeks when the sun is about to rise. As the sun rises slowly over the horizon, over the trees, this particular tree becomes all of a sudden golden. All the leaves are bright with life, and as you watch it, as the hours pass by, that tree, whose name does not matter, what matters is that beautiful tree. An extraordinary quality seems to spread all over the land, over the river. And as the sun rises a little higher, the leaves begin to flutter, to dance. And each hour seems to give to that tree a different quality. Before the sun rises, it has a somber feeling, quiet, far away, full of dignity. And as the day begins, the leaves with the light on them dance and give it that peculiar feeling that one has of great beauty. By midday, its shadow has deepened, and you can sit there protected from the sun, never feeling lonely, with a tree as your companion. As you sit there, there is a relationship of abiding security and a freedom that only trees can know. Towards the evening, when the western skies are lit up by the setting sun, the tree gradually becomes somber, dark, closing in on itself. The sky has become red, yellow, green, but the tree remains quiet, hidden, and is resting for the night. If you establish a relationship with it, then you have relationship with mankind. You are responsible then for that tree and for the trees of the world. But if you have no relationship with the living things on this earth, you may lose whatever relationship you have with humanity, with human beings. We never look deeply into the quality of a tree. We never really touch it, feel its solidity, its rough bark, and hear the sound that is part of the tree. Not the sound of wind through the leaves, not the breeze of a morning that flutters the leaves, but its own sound, the sound of the trunk and the silent sound of the roots. You must be extraordinarily sensitive to hear the sound. This sound is not the noise of the world, not the noise of the chattering of the mind, not the vulgarity of human quarrels and human warfare, but sound as part of the universe. It is odd that we have so little relationship with nature, with the insects and the leaping frog and the owl that hoots among the hills calling for its mate. We never seem to have a feeling for all living things on the earth. If we could establish a deep, abiding relationship with nature, we would never kill an animal for our appetite. We would never harm, vivisect a monkey, a dog, a guinea pig for our benefit. We would find other ways to heal our wounds, heal our bodies. But the healing of the mind is something totally different. That healing gradually takes place if you are with nature, with that orange on the tree, and the blade of grass that pushes through the cement, and the hills covered, hidden by the clouds. This is not sentiment or romantic imagination, but a reality of a relationship with everything that lives and moves on the earth. Man has killed millions of whales and is still killing them. All that we derive from their slaughter can be had through other means. But apparently, man loves to kill things, the fleeting deer, the marvelous gazelle, and the great elephant. We love to kill each other. This killing of other human beings has never stopped throughout the history of man's life on this earth. If we could, and we must, establish a long, abiding relationship with nature, with the actual trees, the bushes, the flowers, the grass, and the fast-moving clouds, then we would never slaughter another human being for any reason whatsoever. Organized murder is war, and though we demonstrate against particular war, the nuclear, or any other kind of war, we have never demonstrated against war. We have never said that to kill another human being is the greatest sin on earth. Flying at 41,000 feet from one continent to another, you see nothing but snow, miles of snow. This is written in February. All the mountains and the hills are covered with snow, and the rivers too are frozen. You see them wandering, meandering all over the land. And far below, the distant farms are covered with ice and snow. It is a long, tiresome flight of 11 hours. The passengers were chattering away. There was a couple behind one, and they never stopped talking, never looked at the glory of those marvelous hills and mountains, never looked at the other passengers. Apparently, they were absorbed in their own thoughts, in their own problems, in their chatterings. And at last, after a tedious, calm flight in the dead of winter, you land at the town on the Pacific. After the noise and the bustle, you leave that ugly, sprawling, vulgar, shouting city and the endless shops selling almost all the same things. You leave all that behind as you go round the coast highway of the blue Pacific, following the seashore on a beautiful road, wandering through the hills, meeting the sea often. And as you leave the Pacific behind and enter into the country, winding over various small hills, peaceful, quiet, full of that strange dignity of the country, you enter the valley. You have been there for the last 60 years, and each time you're astonished to enter into this valley. It is quiet, almost untouched by man. You enter into this valley, which is almost like a vast cup, a nest. Actually, ohai is an Indian word for nest. Then you leave the little village and climb to about 1,400 feet, passing rows and rows of orange orchards and groves. The air is perfumed with orange blossoms. The whole valley is filled with that scent. And the smell of it is in your mind, in your heart, in your whole body. It is the most extraordinary feeling of living in a perfume that will last for about 3 weeks or more. And there's a quietness in the mountains, a dignity. And each time you look at those hills and the high mountains, and the high mountain, which is over 6,000 feet, you're really surprised that such country exists. Each time you come to this quiet, peaceful valley, there's a feeling of strange aloofness, of deep silence, and the vast spreading of slow time. Man is trying to spoil the valley, but it has been preserved, and the mountains that morning were extraordinarily beautiful. You could almost touch them. The majesty, the vast sense of permanency is there in them. And you enter quietly into the house where you have lived for over 60 years, and the atmosphere, the air is, if one can use that word, holy. You can feel it. You can almost touch it. As it has rained considerably, for it is the rainy season, all the hills and the little folds of the mountain are green, flourishing, full. The earth is smiling with such delight, with some deep, quiet understanding of its own existence. Here too we sometimes skip a paragraph. The other day, as one was walking along a secluded, wooded lane, far from the noise and the brutality and the vulgarity of civilization, right away from everything that was put together by man, there was a sense of great quietness enveloping all things, serene, distant, and full of the sound of the earth. As you walked along quietly, not disturbing the things of the earth around you, the bushes, the trees, the crickets and the birds, suddenly, round a bend there were 2 small creatures quarreling with each other, fighting in their small way. One was trying to drive off the other. The other was intruding, trying to get into the other's little hole, and the owner was fighting it off. Presently the owner won and the other ran off. Again there was quietness, a sense of deep solitude. And as you looked up, the path climbed high into the mountains. The waterfall was gently murmuring down the side of the path. There was great beauty and infinite dignity, not the dignity achieved by man that seems so vain and arrogant. The little creature had identified itself with its home, as we human beings do. We're always trying to identify ourselves with our race, with our culture, with those things we believe in, with some mystical figure or some savior, some kind of super authority. Identifying with something seems to be the nature of man. Probably we have derived this feeling from that little animal. One wonders why this craving, longing for identification exists. One can understand the identification with one's physical needs, the necessary things, food, clothes, shelter, and so on. But inwardly, inside the skin, as it were, we try to identify ourselves with the past, with tradition, with some fanciful, romantic image, a symbol much cherished. And surely in this identification there is a sense of security, safety, a sense of being owned and of possessing. This gives great comfort. One takes comfort, security in any form of illusion. And man apparently needs many illusions. In the distance there is the hoot of an owl, and there is a deep-throated reply from the other side of the valley. It is still dawn, the noise of the day has not begun, and everything is quiet. There's something strange and holy where the sun arises. There is a prayer, a chant to the dawn, to that strange, quiet light. That early morning, the light was subdued, there was no breeze, and all the vegetation, the trees, the bushes were quiet, still, waiting for the sun to arise. And perhaps the sun would not come up for another half hour or so, and the dawn was slowly covering the earth with a strange stillness. Gradually, slowly, the topmost mountain was getting brighter, and the sun was touching it, golden, clear, and the snow was pure, untouched by the light of day. As you climbed, leaving the little village paths below, the noise of the earth, the crickets, the quails, and other birds began their morning song, their chant, their rich worship of the day. And as the sun arose, you were part of that light and had left behind everything that thought had put together. You completely forgot yourself. The psyche was empty of its struggles and its pains. And as you walked, climbed, there was no sense of separateness, no sense of being even a human being. The morning mist was gathering slowly in the valley, and that mist was you, getting more and more thick, more and more into the fancy, the romance, the idiocy of one's own life. And after a long period of time, you came down. There was the murmur of the wind, insects, the calls of many birds. And as you came down, the mist was disappearing. There were streets, shops, and the glory of the dawn was fast fading away. And you began your daily routine, caught in the habit of work, the contentions between man and man, the divisions of identification, the division of ideologies, the preparations for wars, your own inward pain, and the everlasting sorrow of man. It was a cool, fresh morning, and there was the light that California alone has, especially the southern part of it. It is really quite an extraordinary light. We have traveled probably all over the world, most of the world at least, have seen various lights and clouds in many parts of the earth. The clouds in Holland are very close. Here in California, the clouds against the blue sky seem to hold the light everlastingly. The light that great clouds have with their extraordinary shape and quality. It was a cool, very nice morning, and as you climbed the rocky path up to great height and looked down into the valley and saw the row upon row of orange trees, avocados, and the hills that surround the valley, it was as though you were out of this world, so completely lost were you to all things, to the weariness, to man's ugly reactions and actions. You left all that behind as you climbed up and up the very rocky path. You left behind far below you the vanity, the arrogance, the vulgarity of uniforms, decorations spread all over your chest, and the vanity and strange costumes of priests. You left all that behind. And as you went up, you nearly trod on a mother with her dozen or more little baby quails, and they scattered with chirping into the bushes. As you went on up and looked back, the mother had again gathered them round her, and they were all quiet, secure, under the wings of their mother. You had to climb hour after hour to reach the great height. Some days you saw a bear a little way off, and it paid no attention. And the deer across the gully, they too seemed unconcerned. At last you reached the height of a rocky plateau, and across the hills to the southwest you saw the distant sea, so blue, so quiet, so infinitely far away. You sat on a rock, smooth, cracked, where the sun must for century upon century, without any regret, have cracked it. And in the little cracks you saw tiny little living things scurrying about, and there was that utter silence, complete and infinite. A very large bird, they call it a condor, was circling in the sky. Apart from that movement, there was nothing astir, except these tiny little insects, but there was that silence that exists only where man has not been before. It was so peaceful. You left everything behind in that little village so far below you, literally everything. Your identity, if you had any, your belongings, the possessions of your experiences, your memories of things that had meant something to you. You left all that behind, down below there amidst the shining groves and orchards. Here there was absolute silence, and you were totally alone. It was a marvelous morning, and the cool air, which was becoming colder, wrapped round you, and you were completely lost to everything. There was nothing and beyond nothing. You should really forget the word meditation. That word has been corrupted. The ordinary meaning of that word, to ponder over, to consider, to think about, is rather trivial and ordinary. If you want to understand the nature of meditation, you should really forget the word, because you cannot possibly measure with words that which is not measurable, that which is beyond all measure. No words can convey it, nor any system, modes of thought, practice, or discipline. Meditation, or rather if we could find another word which has not been so mutilated, made so ordinary, corrupt, which has become the means of earning a great deal of money, if you can put aside that word, then you begin quietly and gently to feel a movement that is not of time. Again, the word movement implies time. What is meant is that a movement that has no beginning and no end. A movement in the sense of a wave, wave upon wave, starting from nowhere and with no beach to crash upon. It is an endless wave. Time, however slow it is rather tiresome. Time means growth, evolution, to become, to achieve, to learn, to change. And time is not the way of that which lies far beyond the word meditation. Time has nothing to do with it. Time is the action of will, of desire, and desire cannot in any way, here the words are inaudible, it lies far beyond the word meditation. Here, sitting on that rock with a blue sky, it is astonishingly blue. The air is so pure, unpolluted. Far beyond this range is the desert. You can see it, miles of it. It's really a timeless perception of that which is. It is only that perception which you can say it is. You sat there watching for what seemed many days, many years, many centuries. As the sun was going down to the sea, you made your way down to the valley, and everything around you was alight. That blade of grass, that sumac, the towering eucalyptus, and the flowering earth. It took time to come down, as it had taken time to go up. But that which has no time cannot be measured by words. And meditation is only a word. The roots of heaven are in deep, abiding silence. This is the last of the dictations. Walking down the straight road on a lovely morning, it was spring, and the sky was extraordinarily blue. There wasn't a cloud in it, and the sun was just warm, not too hot. It felt nice. And the leaves were shining, and a sparkle was in the air. It was really a most extraordinarily beautiful morning. The high mountain was there, impenetrable, and the hills below were green and lovely. And as you walked along quietly without much thought, you saw a dead leaf, yellow and bright red, a leaf from the autumn. How beautiful that leaf was, so simple in its death, so lively, full of the beauty and vitality of the whole tree in the summer. Strange that it had not withered. Looking at it more closely, one saw all the veins and the stem and the shape of that leaf. That leaf was all the tree. Why do human beings die so miserably, so unhappily, with a disease, old age, senility, the body shrunk, ugly? Why can't they die naturally and as beautifully as this leaf? What is wrong with us? In spite of all the doctors, medicines, hospitals, operations and all the agony of life, and the pleasures too, we don't seem able to die with dignity, simplicity, and with a smile. Once walking along a lane, one heard behind one a chant, melodious, rhythmic, with the ancient strength of Sanskrit. One stopped and looked around. An eldest son, naked to his waist, was carrying a terracotta pot with a fire burning in it. He was holding it in another vessel, and behind him were two men carrying his dead father, covered with a white cloth, and they were all chanting. One knew what that chant was, one almost joined in. They went past, and one followed them. They were going down the road chanting, and the eldest son was in tears. They carried the father to the beach, where they had already collected a great pile of wood, and they laid the body on top of that heap of wood and set it on fire. It was all so natural, so extraordinarily simple. There were no flowers, there was no hearse, there were no black carriages with black horses. It was all very quiet and utterly dignified. And one looked at that leaf and the 1,000 leaves of the tree. The winter brought that leaf from its mother onto that path, and it would presently die out completely and wither, be gone, carried away by the winds and lost. As you teach children mathematics, writing, reading, and all the business of acquiring knowledge, they should also be taught the great dignity of death, not as a morbid, unhappy thing that one has to face eventually, but as something of daily life. The daily life of looking at the blue sky and the grasshopper on a leaf. It is part of learning as you grow teeth and have all the discomfort of childish diseases, illnesses. Children have extraordinary curiosity. If you see the nature of death, you don't explain that everything dies, dust to dust and so on, but without any fear you explain to them gently and make them feel that living and dying are one. Not at the end of one's life after 50, 60 or 90 years, but that death is like that leaf. Look at the old men and women, how decrepit, how lost, how unhappy, how ugly they look. Is it because they have not really understood either the living or the dying? They have used life, they waste away their life with incessant conflict, which only exercises and gives strength to the self, the me, the ego. We spend our days in such varieties of conflict and unhappinesses, with some joy and pleasure, drinking, smoking, late nights, and work, work, work. And at the end of one's life, one faces that thing called death and is frightened of it. One thinks it can always be understood, felt deeply. The child with his curiosity can be helped to understand that death is not merely the wasting of the body through disease, old age, or some unexpected accident, but that the ending of every day is also the ending of oneself every day. There is no resurrection, that is superstition, a dogmatic belief. Everything on earth, on this beautiful earth, lives, dies, comes into being and withers away. To grasp this whole movement of life requires intelligence, not the intelligence of thought or books or knowledge, but the intelligence of love and compassion with its sensitivity. One is very certain that if the educator understands the significance of death and the dignity of it, the extraordinary simplicity of dying, understands it not intellectually but deeply, then he may be able to convey to the student, to the child, that dying, the ending, is not to be avoided. It is not something to be frightened of, for it is part of one's whole life, so that as the student, the child grows up, he will never be frightened of the ending. If all the human beings who have lived before us, past generations upon generations, still lived on this earth, how terrible it would be. The beginning is not the ending. And one would like to help, no, that's the wrong word. One would like in education to bring death into some kind of reality, actuality, not of someone else dying, but of each one of us, however young or old, having inevitably to face that thing. It is not a sad affair of tears, of loneliness, of separation. We kill so easily, not only the animals for one's food, but the vast, unnecessary killing for amusement called sport, killing a deer because that is the season. Killing a deer is like killing your neighbor. You kill animals because you've lost touch with nature, with all the living things on this earth. You kill in wars for so many romantic, nationalistic, political ideologies. In the name of God, you have killed people. Violence and killing go together. As one looked at that dead leaf, with all its beauty and color, maybe one would very deeply comprehend, be aware of what one's own death must be. Not at the very end, but at the very beginning. Death isn't some horrific thing, something to be avoided, something to be postponed, but rather something to be with day in and day out. And out of that comes an extraordinary sense of immensity. We will end here.